The studio was loud, bright, and buzzing with excitement as the next round of America's Got Talent contestants prepared backstage. But everything shifted the moment a quiet Filipino man stepped into the spotlight. He wasn't flashy or confident-looking. He wore a simple black leather jacket, faded jeans, and held an old guitar that looked like it had survived decades of stories. His name was Rico de la Vega, a 38-year-old janitor from Manila. When he spoke, his voice trembled slightly, revealing both nerves and deep emotion. He told the judges that he had grown up listening to Elvis Presley with his late father, who always said, "Son, one day your voice will take you somewhere the world can see." Rico's eyes glistened as he added softly, "I'm here tonight, to fulfill that promise." Simon leaned forward, sensing something different. Heidi smiled encouragingly, while Sophia whispered, "He's so humble." The audience quieted down, unsure what kind of performance was coming. Many assumed it would be simple, maybe even forgettable. But there was something unusual in the air. A kind of stillness that felt heavy, emotional, and oddly electric. Even the backstage crew paused their movements, glancing toward the stage as if instinctively drawn to the man who stood silently before the microphone. Rico placed his fingers gently on the guitar strings, closed his eyes, and took a slow breath. The lights dimmed, casting him in a warm golden glow that made him look like a figure frozen in time. Before playing the first note, he whispered, barely audible but full of devotion. "This one's for you, Papa." And in that moment, before a single sound left his guitar, the entire AGT studio fell into a silence so deep, it felt as if the world was holding its breath. The silence in the AGT studio was so thick you could almost feel it brushing against your skin. Every eye stayed locked on Rico as he lifted his guitar and strummed the very first chord. It was soft, almost delicate, but it carried a strange warmth, like an echo from another lifetime. Then he opened his mouth. The moment his voice filled the theater, the entire room transformed. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just impressive. It was uncannily familiar, a voice rich with warmth, velvet smooth, and dripping with the soulful nostalgia that had defined Elvis Presley's golden era. The audience gasped as if struck by a wave. A woman in the front row immediately raised her hands to her mouth. A man farther back stood up without realizing it. Even the camera operator froze for a beat, stunned by how effortlessly Rico transported everyone back in time. Rico wasn't imitating. He wasn't copying. He was channeling. Not just the sound of Elvis, but the emotion, raw, aching, powerful, flowed through every note. Sophia leaned toward Heidi and whispered, "This feels supernatural." Heidi nodded, eyes wide. But the most shocking reaction was Simon's. His usual cool, unshakable expression was gone. He sat up straight, stunned, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. He had heard thousands of voices, but nothing like this, nothing so genuine, so haunting, so alive. As Rico sang, the crowd grew louder, cheering mid-song, something that almost never happened. The judges exchanged glances. Producers backstage started panicking because the audience reaction was too strong to control. And just like that, AGT hit a moment where the show itself couldn't keep going normally. Rico's voice was too powerful. Too unexpected. Too legendary. The energy in the room had shifted, and everyone knew this performance was about to become historic. Rico kept singing, completely unaware that behind the cameras, chaos had begun. His eyes stayed closed, his voice rising and falling with perfect control, carrying the soul of a man who had spent years singing alone in dimly lit rooms, small bars, and quiet corners of life. But on this stage, his voice felt too big, too powerful, too real. The audience couldn't contain themselves. Cheers erupted in the middle of the song, so loud they drowned out the orchestra track. People were crying, clapping, shouting, standing, waving their arms. The sound engineer frantically adjusted the audio levels, but it was impossible. Rico had created a wave no machine could control. Suddenly, one of the floor directors rushed toward the judge's table and whispered urgently to Simon. The reaction was simple but unprecedented. Simon raised his hand, not to stop Rico, but to stop the entire production crew. "Don't cut him off," he said firmly. "No commercial break. No transition. Let him finish." Everyone froze. Camera operators held their shots. Stagehands stood in place. Even the judges stopped reacting and simply listened. The show, normally run with military precision, came to a complete and total halt. Why? Because something like this had never happened before. Rico was singing with the kind of emotion that didn't come from practice, it came from pain, from memories, from love. His soft vibrato carried years of loneliness. His powerful notes carried every dream he had sacrificed. The audience became silent again, not because they were told to, but because the performance had reached a point where applause would feel like an interruption. For a moment, everyone in the studio, every judge, every viewer, every crew member, felt they were witnessing not a performance, but a rebirth. A soul-deep revival of a legend. The world had stopped moving, just to listen. As Rico approached the final chorus, something incredible happened in the room. The energy wasn't just excitement anymore, it was reverence. People weren't watching a contestant, they were witnessing a moment that felt larger than the show, larger than the stage, almost larger than life itself. Rico's voice climbed higher, richer, trembling with decades of stories only he and his late father knew. The emotion was so raw that even the loudest fans went quiet again, afraid to break the magic. The theater lights dimmed into a warm amber, making Rico look like he was glowing, standing alone in the center of a universe made of sound and memory. Then came the final note. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft, fragile, heartbreakingly beautiful. The kind of note that doesn't just end a song, it etches itself onto the soul of everyone who hears it. As the last vibration faded into silence, Rico slowly lowered his guitar. His hands trembled. His chest rose and fell in shaky breaths. He looked terrified, like he didn't know whether he had done enough, whether he had honored his father, whether the world had truly heard him. The room stayed silent for a full second. Then another. Then the explosion. The entire audience rose to their feet in one unified motion. The cheers were deafening, so loud that the stage floor actually vibrated. Some people were crying. Others were shouting Rico's name. One woman screamed, "The king is back." Rico covered his face, overwhelmed, shaking with emotion. But the most unforgettable moment came from Simon. He didn't clap. He didn't stand immediately. He simply stared at Rico with disbelief, awe, and something almost like gratitude. Then, slowly, he stood up. And the world knew something historic was about to happen. The cheers still thundered across the entire AGT studio when Simon finally stepped forward. The other judges looked at him, sensing what was about to happen, their expressions a blend of anticipation and awe. But Simon's eyes were fixed only on Rico, eyes that rarely softened, rarely showed emotion, but now glimmered with something unmistakable, respect. Rico stood frozen at center stage, his hands still shaking around his guitar. His chest rose and fell rapidly, overwhelmed by the audience's roar. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he didn't try to wipe them away. He had no idea what was coming next. Simon approached the microphone. He took a breath. "Rico," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "I have judged thousands of singers, thousands. But what you just did here tonight." He paused, searching for the right words. "You didn't just sing Elvis. You brought his spirit back. You reminded all of us why music is timeless, why passion matters, and why dreams, even the ones buried deep inside us, are still worth chasing." The audience erupted, clapping and shouting in agreement. "And," Simon continued, his tone warming, "I believe your father is incredibly proud of you right now." Rico's lips trembled. He looked up toward the lights, whispering something no one else could hear, an intimate message meant only for his father. Then Simon stepped back from the mic. Turned toward the glowing golden buzzer. And without hesitation, slammed it. The theater exploded again as the entire stage burst into a golden storm. Confetti rained down like heaven opened above him. Rico fell to his knees, completely overcome, sobbing into his hands as gold covered his shoulders, his guitar, his face, his dreams. The audience chanted his name. The judges stood in awe. And the world had just met the man they would soon call the Filipino Elvis who stopped AGT.